I never imagined that my son, the boy I raised with my own hands, the child I protected through storms and sleepless nights, would one day forbid me from being part of the most important day of his life. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I had just finished preparing dinner when he arrived, holding an envelope in his hands. His face was tense, his jaw locked as if he were carrying a weight too heavy for his young heart. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling, "I'm getting married, but I don't want you at the wedding." For a moment, the world stopped spinning. My chest tightened, and I felt a silence so sharp it cut through my soul. I stared at him, searching his eyes for some sign that it was a cruel joke, but there was none. He was serious. I tried to smile, even though my throat burned with tears. "Why, son?" I whispered. "What have I done that's so unforgivable?" He looked away, ashamed. "It's complicated. She doesn't want you there. She thinks you'll embarrass me. And maybe she's right." Those words shattered me. All the sacrifices, all the years of working late shifts to pay for his education, all the nights I went hungry so he wouldn't, suddenly reduced to shame. My own flesh and blood believed I was unworthy of standing beside him on the happiest day of his life. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I simply nodded, though inside my heart was bleeding. "If that's what you want, son," I said quietly, "I'll respect your wish." That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories flooded back, his first steps, his first day at school, the way he used to run into my arms calling me his hero. When had I stopped being that man in his eyes? When had love turned into rejection? The next day, while he was celebrating with his new bride and her family, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The chair across from me felt unbearably empty. I poured myself a glass of water, raised it in silence, and whispered a blessing for him. Even in my pain, I wanted his happiness. But life has a way of revealing truths when we least expect it. The following morning, I woke to a desperate sound, fists pounding against my front door. When I opened it, there he was, my son, the same man who had cast me aside just a day before, kneeling on the ground, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he sobbed, his voice broken, "please, forgive me. I made the worst mistake of my life." And in that moment, everything changed. The sun had barely risen when I opened the door to find him there, kneeling as if the weight of the world had crushed him to the ground. His wedding suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked, his face swollen with tears. For a moment, I simply froze. My son, the man who had banned me from witnessing his vows, was now clinging to my doorstep like a child who had lost everything. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking, "I was wrong. I was so wrong." I wanted to reach out, to lift him into my arms, but a part of me hesitated. His words from the day before still echoed in my mind, "You'll embarrass me." The wound was fresh, raw, bleeding. And yet, seeing him like that, broken and trembling, stirred something deeper than pride inside me, something a father never loses. "Come inside," I finally said, stepping aside. He stumbled in, collapsed on the couch, and buried his face in his hands. For several long minutes, the room was filled only with the sound of his sobs. I sat across from him, silent, waiting. I knew the truth would come out, but it had to be in his time, his words. At last, he looked up at me, his eyes red and desperate. "Dad, the wedding was a disaster. His voice cracked. She humiliated me in front of everyone." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "Right after the ceremony, during the reception, she made a toast. In front of her family, her friends, everyone. And in that toast, she laughed at me. She said I was weak, that I let her control everything, that even my own father obeyed her wishes because she told me to keep you away." The words hit me like thunder. My chest ached with both anger and sorrow. "She said that?" I asked, hardly believing it. He nodded miserably. "She used me, Dad. Used my love, my fear of losing her, to turn me against you. She said she wanted to erase the past, and that included you. I thought if I obeyed her, I would prove I loved her. But instead, I lost everything. I lost you." Tears welled in my eyes, though I tried to hold them back. The boy I had raised, the man I had prayed for every night, had been trapped in chains he didn't even see until it was too late. I walked out of the reception, he continued. People laughed. Her family mocked me, and all I could think about was you. I remembered every sacrifice, every time you stood by me when the world turned its back, and I realized I betrayed the only person who ever loved me without conditions. He reached for my hands, clutching them like a drowning man grasping a lifeline. "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, please don't turn me away." My throat tightened. My pride screamed to remind him of the pain he'd caused me, but a deeper voice, quieter, yet stronger, spoke within me. The voice of a father's love. I pulled him into my arms. He trembled like the little boy he once was, the boy who used to cry in my lap after scraping his knees, and I whispered, my voice breaking, "Son, there is nothing you could ever do that would make me stop being your father. You hurt me, yes, but forgiveness is what keeps love alive." He wept harder, his tears soaking my shirt. I held him until the storm inside him began to quiet, but deep in my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. The truth about his wife, about the marriage that had begun in betrayal, was far from over, and whether he realized it or not, the road ahead would test both of us in ways we had never imagined. Because sometimes, the real wedding doesn't happen at the altar, it happens in the breaking and rebuilding of trust. The morning stretched into hours as my son sat in my living room, still wearing the suit he had worn to say his vows. His hands trembled, his voice cracked, but his eyes, those eyes I once knew as innocent, were now filled with the torment of a man betrayed by the very person he trusted most. He had told me fragments of the story, but I knew there was more. I could feel it in the weight of his silence, in the way he avoided meeting my gaze when I asked simple questions. Finally, when the tea on the table had gone cold, I leaned forward. "Son," I said softly, "you need to tell me everything. No half-truths, no hesitation. What really happened yesterday?" He swallowed hard, as if the truth itself was a bitter poison. Then he began. "She planned it, Dad. Every detail. She wanted to make me look small in front of her family. From the very beginning, she told them stories, half-lies, half-truths, about you, about me. She painted me as weak, and you as a man who didn't deserve respect. That's why she never wanted you at the wedding. It wasn't about embarrassment, it was about control." My jaw clenched, my heart aching. "Control?" He nodded miserably. "Yes. She wanted to be the center of everything. The perfect bride from the perfect family. She thought if you were there, people would see the truth, that I came from a humble background, that I was raised by a man who worked hard, who had calloused hands, who wasn't afraid to sweat for his son's future. She hated that image. She wanted prestige, status." The word stabbed me deeper than I expected. I had never been ashamed of who I was, of the life I had lived. But to think my son's wife used my sacrifices as a weapon, it burned like fire in my chest. "What happened after the toast?" I asked. He hesitated, then closed his eyes. She laughed, Dad, in front of everyone. She called me spineless, said I would never make decisions without her approval. Her brothers clapped. Her cousins cheered. Even her parents smiled. And when I looked around for someone to defend me, to stand by me, no one did. His voice broke. I realized I had given up the one person who would have stood for me, you, and I had done it willingly. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to tell him it was all right, that we could move forward. But before I could speak, there was a knock on the door. We both froze. I rose slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. Standing there was his new wife, still in her wedding dress, though it was now stained, wrinkled, and torn at the hem. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes wild with fury. "There you are," she hissed, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I knew you'd run back to him." My son stood behind me, his body stiffening. "Don't speak to me like that," he said, though his voice shook. She stepped forward, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This is your fault. You poisoned him against me. You've always been jealous, haven't you? Afraid he'd finally be free from you, free from your pathetic shadow." Her words were venom, each syllable designed to pierce. But I stood tall, refusing to let her see me flinch. "You've already taken enough from him," I said calmly, "but you won't take his dignity." My son's fists clenched. "She doesn't love me, Dad. She never did. She loved the idea of me, the name, the security, the chance to laugh at the man who raised me." He turned to her, his voice stronger now. "You turned me against my own father. And yesterday, in front of everyone, you proved you never saw me as a husband. You saw me as a trophy." Her face twisted with rage. "You think you can just walk away from me? From my family?" she spat. "You'll regret this. Both of you will regret this." And with that, she stormed off into the street, her veil fluttering behind her like the tail of a fallen angel. Silence fell. My son collapsed back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands once again. But this time, something was different. The shame was still there, but beneath it, I saw resolve beginning to take root. "Dad," he whispered, "I don't know what to do. My marriage is over before it even began. Everyone's laughing at me. Her family, her friends, they are calling me weak, saying I abandoned her. How do I stand after this?" I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Son," I said, my voice steady, "sometimes the world has to break you before you can stand tall. You thought love meant obedience. But real love, real strength, comes from truth. And the truth is, you are not weak. You were deceived. Now you have a choice: stay broken, or rise stronger. He lifted his head, tears still glistening in his eyes. Do you really think I can rise after this? I nodded firmly. I know you can, because you are my son. And in that moment, for the first time since the nightmare began, I saw a spark in him, a spark that might, with time, grow into fire. But I also knew this was far from over. Her threats lingered like shadows, and the whispers of shame from the community would soon spread like wildfire. The true battle was just beginning. The day after she stormed from my doorstep, the entire town seemed to know. Small towns have a way of spreading stories faster than fire in dry grass. Whispers followed my son wherever he went, in the grocery store, on the sidewalks, even at the church steps. He left his bride the day after the wedding. She said he's nothing without her. Poor girl, imagine the shame, but the whispers always turned, inevitably, to me. They say the father caused it. Imagine a son banning his own dad, and then crawling back the next day. Some curses fall on entire families. I heard them. I pretended not to, but each word cut like glass under the skin. My son refused to leave the house 4 days. He sat in the small room I once built for him, the same walls that had watched him grow from boy to man. Now those walls watched him crumble. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. Sometimes, at night, I could hear him crying into his pillow. I tried to give him space. But one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I pushed his door open and sat beside him. He didn't look at me. Son, I said quietly, you can't hide forever. His voice was hollow. You don't understand, Dad. They are laughing at me, everyone. I'm the fool who couldn't even keep his bride for one night. I'm the man who betrayed his father, only to come crawling back. I'm nothing. I clenched my fists. Hearing my son destroy himself with words was worse than hearing her insults. You are not nothing, I said firmly. You are blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh. You made a mistake, yes. You let yourself be blinded by love, yes. But weakness is not falling, it's staying down when life knocks you over. And right now, son, the only thing keeping you broken is your own voice. He finally looked at me, his eyes red, but behind them was a question too heavy for him to voice. Do you want to know what strength is? I asked. He nodded slowly. Strength is facing those who laugh at you, walking past them, head high, even if every step burns like fire. Strength is proving that you can lose everything, and still stand as a man who refuses to be defined by failure. His lips trembled. But what if I can't, Dad? What if I'll never be more than a joke? I leaned closer, my hand gripping his shoulder. Then let them laugh. Let the whole world mock. Their laughter is empty. What matters is that you rise, not for them, not for me, but for yourself. Silence stretched. Then, almost like a flicker of life, I saw it, his back straightening, his jaw tightening, the faintest glimmer of defiance. But the world would not make it easy. The next week, we went into town together. I wanted him to face the stairs with me at his side. As we walked into the marketplace, conversation stopped. Heads turned. Some looked with pity, others with mockery. I could hear their murmurs. There he is, the runaway groom. Did you hear? She's already talking to a lawyer. Poor father. Imagine raising a son only to be shamed like that. My son's steps faltered, but I placed a firm hand on his back, guiding him forward. Keep walking, I whispered. Then, suddenly, her family appeared. Her father, her mother, and her 2 brothers. Their faces were full of arrogance, their voices loud enough for the entire market to hear. Well, her father sneered. Look who finally crawled out of hiding. The coward who couldn't keep his wife. The crowd stirred. Some smirked. Others waited for my son's response. He froze, his hands trembling. For a moment, I thought he would run. But then he looked at me, just one glance, and I nodded. He turned back to her father, his voice unsteady but growing with every word. You're right, I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. But I'd rather face my shame than live a life built on lies. I won't be controlled by your daughter's pride, or your family's cruelty. And if the price of my freedom is your laughter, then laugh all you want. At least I'm free. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her brother stepped forward, fists clenched, but her father raised a hand, stopping them. For a moment, he stared at my son, his lips curling into a bitter smile. You'll regret those words, he said coldly. Mark them well. Then they turned and walked away. The crowd slowly dispersed, but something had shifted. People looked at my son differently, not with pity, but with a strange respect. The boy who had been mocked now stood as a man who had faced humiliation head-on. That night, back at home, he sat across from me at the table. His shoulders were still heavy, but his eyes burned with something new. "Dad," he said softly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing: I don't want to be the man who hides anymore. I want to rebuild, not just for me, but for you, for us." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, though I quickly brushed it away. "Then we'll rebuild together, son. Brick by brick, day by day. And one day, the same voices that mocked you will tell your story as a lesson in strength." For the first time in weeks, he smiled. A faint smile, yes, but it was real. And though I knew the storms ahead were far from over, I also knew this: the bond between father and son, once fractured, was now being reforged in fire. And fire, when it doesn't consume, purifies. For a few weeks, peace seemed possible. My son was slowly rebuilding himself, waking earlier, helping me with work around the house, even daring to walk into town with his head held higher. The whispers hadn't disappeared, but something about the way he carried himself had changed how people spoke. Yet peace never lasts long when pride and vengeance are at stake. One evening, just as we finished dinner, there was a knock at the door, a hard, deliberate knock, the kind that doesn't come from a neighbor, but from someone bringing trouble. I opened it to find a man in a gray suit holding a leather briefcase. His face was expressionless, his tone cold. "Are you Mr. Alvarez?" he asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. He extended a folder toward me. "You've been served." Before I could respond, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the night. I stared at the folder in my hands, dread coiling in my stomach. My son came to the door, his face pale. "Dad, what is it?" I opened it slowly. Inside were legal papers, pages and pages of accusations, stamped with her name. "She's suing me," my son whispered, his voice hollow. "For abandonment. For humiliation. For emotional damages." I scanned the documents, my blood boiling as I read the venomous lies. She claimed he had abused her emotionally, that he had humiliated her by walking out, that he had conspired with me to ruin her reputation. "She's trying to destroy you," I said, my voice low. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "Dad, if she wins, I'll be ruined. Everything I've worked for will be gone." And I knew it was true. Her family had money, influence, lawyers who would twist every word until black became white. Against them, we were nothing but two men with calloused hands and broken hearts. But I wasn't about to let them devour my son. Not while I was still breathing. "We'll fight," I said firmly. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with fear. "How, Dad? We don't have their money, their connections, their power. What do we have?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "We have the truth. And the truth, son, is stronger than gold." He shook his head. "Sometimes the truth isn't enough." "Then we'll make it enough," I replied. The days that followed were a blur of tension and preparation. Her lawyers sent more letters, each colder and crueler than the last. Rumors spread faster than wildfire, that my son had left her for another woman, that I had plotted the wedding's collapse, that we were liars and manipulators. At the market, people stopped speaking when we entered. At church, some avoided our pew entirely. The weight of shame pressed heavier than ever. One night, I found my son sitting outside, staring at the stars. His face was lined with exhaustion far beyond his years. "Dad," he said quietly, "what if she's right? What if I really am weak? What if I deserve this?" I sat beside him, the night air cool against our skin. "Son, listen to me carefully. Weakness isn't being broken. Weakness is staying broken. You've already begun to rise. Don't let her convince you otherwise. Her power isn't truth, it's fear, and fear only controls those who allow it." He turned to me, his eyes wet. "But what if I can't win?" I placed my hand over his. "Then you'll lose standing tall. And that, son, is still victory. But fate has a way of testing resolve." A week before the first court hearing, her family came to our house, not with lawyers, but with rage. Her father, her brothers, even she herself stood on our porch, their faces twisted with fury. "You think you can fight us?" her father bellowed. "We'll bury you in debt, in shame. No one will believe your side. He pointed at my son, is nothing without us. He'll crawl back, begging for her forgiveness, or he'll be crushed." My son stood frozen, his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he would collapse under the weight of their words. But then, he stepped forward. "No," he said, his voice firm. "I won't crawl back. I'd rather starve with my father than feast with snakes." The words hung in the air like thunder. Her brothers lunged forward, but I stepped between them, my eyes blazing. "You've taken enough," I growled. "This house is not yours to poison. Leave before I make you." They hesitated, fury and pride warring in their eyes. Finally, her father spat on the ground. "This isn't over. The court will finish what she started." Then they turned and stormed away into the night. Inside, my son collapsed onto the chair, trembling. "Dad," he whispered, "I don't know if I can survive this." I knelt before him, gripping his shoulders. "You will, son, because you're not alone anymore. This fight, it isn't yours, it's ours. And together, no matter how dark it gets, we will endure." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not just fear, but fire. A fire that would one day burn away every shadow cast upon him. And as I held his gaze, I realized something. This battle wasn't just about him, or me, or her. It was about redemption, about proving that even when the world tries to bury you in lies, the bond of blood, love, and truth can become a fortress no enemy can destroy. But I also knew, the war had only just begun. Finally explodes in public. The day of the first hearing arrived like the slow approach of a storm. For weeks, my son and I had lived in the suffocating grip of anticipation, each day marked by fear of what her lawyers would conjure, what lies would be twisted into truth. The courthouse loomed gray and heavy, its steps crowded with curious eyes. Reporters lingered with notebooks, townsfolk gathered to whisper and judge. As we walked up the stairs together, I felt the weight of their stares pressing against us like stones. Inside, the courtroom was colder than I expected. The high ceiling echoed with murmurs. On one side sat her and her family, dressed in dark suits, their faces carved in stone, their lawyers whispering strategy into their ears. On our side, it was just us, two men with nothing but a public defender who looked too tired to care. When the judge entered, silence fell like a blade. Her lawyer rose first, speaking with polished venom. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to cruelty, abandonment, and emotional torture. This man," he pointed at my son, "humiliated her on the most sacred day of her life. He destroyed her reputation. He mocked her vows. And worse, he conspired with his father, a bitter and manipulative man, to sabotage their marriage." Gasps filled the room. All eyes turned toward me. My son's face burned red, his fists tightening under the table. I placed a steadying hand on his arm. "Don't," I whispered. "Wait." Her lawyer continued, weaving lies with practiced ease. He painted her as a saint, a devoted bride betrayed by a selfish husband and a poisonous father-in-law. By the time he sat down, the room seemed to tilt against us, the scales of justice already weighted. Then my son was called to the stand. He walked slowly, his shoulders stiff, his hands trembling. I prayed silently for strength as he swore to tell the truth. At first, his answers were hesitant. He admitted he had asked me not to attend the wedding. He admitted the reception ended in disaster. Her lawyer pounced on every word, twisting them into daggers. "So you admit," the lawyer said loudly, "that you excluded your father because you were ashamed of him?" My son hesitated. The room leaned forward, hungry for his response. Then, something changed. He straightened. His trembling stopped. And when he spoke, his voice carried a strength I hadn't heard in years. "No," he said firmly, "I wasn't ashamed of my father. I was pressured, manipulated. She told me he would embarrass me, that I had to choose between her and him. And I was weak enough to listen. That's my shame, not my father." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Her lawyer tried to interrupt, but my son raised his voice, louder now, each word cutting through the air like steel. "My father is the only reason I stand here today. He worked his hands to the bone to give me a future. He sacrificed so I could stand taller than he ever could. And on the day I should have honored him, I betrayed him. That is my sin. But don't you dare call him manipulative. Don't you dare twist his love into poison. The only poison was the lies I believed." For a moment, even the judge seemed taken aback. Her face flushed red, fury burning in her eyes. She whispered something to her lawyer, who scrambled for composure. But before he could speak, the judge raised a hand. "Enough," the judge said sternly. He turned to her. "Does the plaintiff have any direct evidence of this alleged conspiracy?" Her lawyer shuffled papers, stammering about testimonies, about statements from friends and family. But when pressed, every witness was tied to her side, her blood, her circle. No neutral ground. Then, unexpectedly, a voice rose from the back of the room. "I have evidence." Every head turned. An older woman stepped forward, clutching a folder. She was one of the workers from the wedding hall. I recognized her immediately, the one who had served food that night. The judge allowed her forward. Hands trembling, she handed the folder to the bailiff. Inside were photographs and a written statement. "Your Honor," she said nervously, "I saw what happened at the reception. She pointed at my son's wife, stood on the table, laughing at him, mocking him, telling everyone he was nothing without her. I heard it with my own ears. And I recorded part of it because I felt sorry for him." The courtroom erupted. Her family shouted, her lawyer objected, but the judge silenced them. The recording was played aloud. Her laughter filled the room, cruel and sharp. Her voice echoed, "His weak. Even his father obeys me. He's nothing without me." The words sliced through every lie she had built. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "It appears the story is not as one-sided as presented. We will recess until tomorrow. But let me make it clear, this court will not be used as a weapon for humiliation." The gavel struck. The hearing ended. Outside, the crowd was in chaos. Reporters swarmed. Some jeered at her, others stared at us with newfound respect. My son stood beside me, his face pale but his eyes blazing with fire. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking, "we're not done yet, but for the first time, I feel like I can breathe." I placed my arm around his shoulders. "This isn't just survival anymore, son. This is justice. And justice, though slow, always arrives." Behind us, I heard her scream in fury, her voice carrying across the courthouse steps. "This isn't over. I'll destroy you both." The war was far from finished. But that day, in that courtroom, the world had heard the truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced. The courthouse the next morning was a battlefield before the war had even begun. Reporters clustered on the steps, townsfolk pressed against the gates, and whispers rippled like waves through the crowd. Everyone knew something monumental was about to happen. Inside, the air was thick with tension. My son sat beside me, pale but determined, his hands clasped tightly. Across from us sat his wife, no, not his wife anymore, but the woman who had turned his life into ash. Her eyes burned with hatred, her lips twisted in a smile that dripped venom. Her family flanked her like an army. The judge entered, and the trial resumed. Her lawyer rose with renewed fury, trying desperately to patch the cracks left by the recording. He argued the video was taken out of context, that it was a private joke, that it did not reflect the true nature of their relationship. He spoke in polished words, but desperation clung to him like sweat. Then it was my son's turn again. He was called back to the stand, and this time, he did not tremble. "Tell us, Mr. Alvarez," the opposing lawyer sneered, "why should we believe you? Why should we trust the word of a man who abandoned his bride within hours of saying 'I do'?" The courtroom buzzed. My son paused, his eyes scanning the faces staring at him, some mocking, some curious, some waiting for him to collapse under the weight of shame. But he didn't collapse. He stood taller. "You shouldn't believe me," he said calmly, "not because of my words. Believe the truth you've already heard with your own ears. Believe the laughter on that recording. Believe the testimony of those who watched her mock me, not love me, on our wedding night. I failed as a husband because I chose the wrong wife. But I will not fail as a man by living in her lies." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Even the judge leaned back, his expression shifting. Her face flushed red, and in her fury, she made her first mistake. She leapt from her chair, pointing at my son with shaking hands. "Lies, all lies. He begged me to marry him. He cried like a child when I threatened to leave. He is weak. He always was. That's why I laughed. Because he's pathetic, just like his father." The judge's gavel slammed down, silencing her. But the damage was done. Every word had been heard, every insult laid bare under oath. Her lawyer buried his face in his hands. Then, something unexpected happened. The judge motioned for me. "Mr. Alvarez, as the father of the defendant, do you wish to speak?" I hesitated. My son looked at me, his eyes pleading but uncertain. I rose slowly, every step heavy, until I stood before the courtroom. "I am not a lawyer," I began. "I am not educated in the ways of courts or laws. My hands know labor, not ink. But I know truth. And the truth is this: I raised my son to honor love, to believe in loyalty, to protect those he holds dear. He trusted the wrong person, yes. He made mistakes, yes. But weakness? No. Weakness is what I see when someone mocks love, when someone builds their pride on another's humiliation. My son was deceived, but he is not broken. And as long as I live, I will stand beside him, not in shame, but in pride." The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world was holding its breath. The judge studied me, then my son, then the woman across the aisle. Finally, he spoke. "This court is not here to repair broken hearts or undo poor choices. It is here to weigh justice. And the justice is clear." He turned to her. "Your claims are unfounded, your conduct disgraceful. This case is dismissed." The gavel struck like thunder. The room erupted. Some cheered, others gasped. Reporters rushed out to spread the news. Her family shouted in outrage, but their voices were drowned by the weight of truth finally laid bare. My son sat frozen, as if the words hadn't yet sunk in. Then, slowly, tears filled his eyes. He turned to me, his voice breaking. "Dad, we won. I placed my hand on his shoulder, my own vision blurring. No, son, I whispered, you won. Not against her, against yourself, against the shame, against the weakness you thought defined you. You rose, and that is victory greater than any court could give. He embraced me, not as the broken man who had once knelt at my door, but as the son who had been reborn through fire. Outside, the sun blazed high, casting light over the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions, but we walked past them without fear. The same people who once mocked now looked with respect, some even with admiration. Behind us, she screamed, her threats echoing through the air. This isn't over. You'll regret this, both of you. But her voice no longer held power. It was the cry of someone who had already lost everything. My son and I walked side by side, no longer shadows of the past, but men stepping into the future. For the first time in years, he looked at me not with shame, but with pride, and I realized then, this was never about the wedding. It was about the bond between father and son, a bond tested by betrayal, broken by lies, and reforged in the furnace of truth. The world could laugh, the world could judge, but we had survived, and survival, when born in truth, is the greatest victory of all. Time has a way of softening the sharpest wounds, though the scars remain like silent witnesses. The trial ended, the gavel fell, and for a while, my son and I lived in a strange quietness, like soldiers returning from a war that left the battlefield in ruins. At first, the world still stared at us. The newspapers ran our story for weeks, twisting it into headlines that sold copies but didn't capture the truth. Runaway groom exposes bride's cruelty. Father saves son in courtroom drama. People stopped me in the market, whispering congratulations or asking nosy questions. Some shook my hand, others mocked behind my back. But slowly, the noise faded. The reporters moved on. The whispers died down. And what remained was just us, father and son, relearning how to be a family again. The healing in the first months, my son rarely left the house. The laughter of neighbors celebrating birthdays, the sight of couples holding hands in the park, everything was a reminder of what he had lost. At night, I sometimes heard him crying in his room, muffling the sound into his pillow. I didn't force him to talk, I just stayed close. Some nights I would knock softly on his door and leave a cup of tea on the table beside him, without a word. Other nights, I'd sit by his bed, telling him stories of when he was a child, how he once believed he could fly if he jumped high enough, how he once cried 4 hours when his pet bird escaped, how he once whispered that he wanted to grow up to be just like Dad. Little by little, the wall around his heart began to crumble. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he said quietly, "Dad, I don't think I'd be alive if you hadn't been here." I turned my face away so he wouldn't see the tears burning my eyes. "Son," I whispered, "you saved me, too. You gave me a reason to keep standing when I thought I was already forgotten." The rebuilding eventually, he found the courage to return to work. People at the office treated him carefully at first, as if he were fragile glass. But over time, respect replaced pity. His boss, impressed by his resilience, entrusted him with greater responsibilities. He rose quickly, not because of ambition, but because he finally carried himself like a man who had been tested and survived. He became a leader others wanted to follow, not because he was perfect, but because he understood pain, failure, and recovery. As for me, I watched him with pride, knowing that all the years I had sacrificed, all the nights I had gone without food so he could eat, were not in vain. He was becoming the man I always believed he could be. The return of love years passed, and then came the day he introduced me to someone new. Her name was Elena. She was quiet, with gentle eyes and a laugh that sounded like music. When she shook my hand for the first time, she said, "I've heard so much about you. You're his hero." I almost laughed and almost cried. My son blushed, trying to change the subject, but I saw the way he looked at her. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't desperation or fear of being alone. It was trust. It was love, real love. Months later, he asked her to marry him. But this time, something different happened. Before he even gave her the ring, he came to me. "Dad," he said, his voice steady, "would you walk me to the altar? Not just as my father, but as the man who never abandoned me." I froze. My heart nearly burst. For years I had carried the memory of that day when he forbade me from attending his wedding, the deepest wound a father could know. And now, here he was, asking me to not just attend, but to stand beside him. When the wedding day came, I wore my best suit. As we walked together down that aisle, I could feel the eyes of every guest, but this time there was no shame. My son's grip on my arm was firm, his face radiant with peace. Elena looked at him with tears of joy, and in that moment, I knew the curse of the past had been broken. The years of grace, the seasons rolled on. My son and Elena built a home filled with laughter instead of cruelty, trust instead of betrayal. They gave me grandchildren, 2 girls and a boy whose voices filled my old house with the sound of life again. One night, my eldest granddaughter climbed onto my lap, her small hands holding my face. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Daddy says you're the strongest man in the world. Is that true?" I smiled, pulling her close. "No, little one," I said softly. "The strongest man is your daddy, because he learned to stand back up when life tried to keep him down." The final reflection now, as I write these words, years have passed since that day when my son knelt crying at my door. I am older, my hair white, my hands slower, but my heart is full. I have seen despair and redemption. I have seen betrayal and forgiveness. I have seen a bond between father and son tested by fire, and I have seen it emerge unbreakable. And if you ask me what the greatest victory of my life has been, I will not say the trial, nor the dismissal of lies, nor even the public respect we earned. It is this, that my son, who once cast me aside in shame, now rises each day with pride, not just in himself, but in the man he calls father. And that is worth more than anything in this world. Years passed, the children grew taller, my son grew stronger, and I grew older. Life has a way of slipping through our fingers quietly, like grains of sand on a windy beach. One day you're holding your child in your arms, and in what feels like the blink of an eye, you're leaning on that same child just to walk across the room. I had lived long enough to see my son redeemed. I had lived long enough to see laughter return to his face, to see love blossom in his home, to hear the voices of grandchildren who knew no shame, only joy. For me, that was more than I ever dared to hope for. But time, relentless as it is, began to whisper that my journey was nearing its end. My body slowed, my lungs weakened, my heart grew tired. The doctor told me I had little time left. I accepted it, for I had already been given more than most men: redemption, reconciliation, and peace. What I did not expect was how my son would honor me in those final days. The promise kept. It began one autumn evening when he came to my room, carrying a worn wooden box. His hands shook as he placed it on the table beside my bed. "Dad," he said, his voice unsteady, "do you remember the day I told you not to come to my wedding? The worst words I ever spoke to you?" I nodded gently, not to reopen the wound, but to let him continue. He opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. He handed it to me. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. It was the original wedding invitation, the one he had meant to give me before his bride poisoned his mind against me. He had kept it all those years, hidden away. "I swore to myself," he whispered, his eyes shining with tears, "that one day, I would make it right. That one day, I would honor you in the way I failed to before. And now, I have." He pulled out another envelope from the box, this one new, white, sealed with wax. He pressed it into my hands. "It's an invitation," he said softly, "to a celebration we're holding next week. Not for me, not for Elena, not for anyone else. It's for you. A gathering of family and friends, not to mourn, but to honor. To let the world know the man you are before you leave it." My breath caught in my throat. My eyes blurred with tears I could not stop. For the first time, I understood, he was rewriting the story. Where once he had excluded me from his wedding, now he was including me in his farewell. The following week, I sat in a chair beneath a canopy of autumn leaves. The garden was filled with people, neighbors, friends, my grandchildren running between tables, laughter echoing like music. My son stood at the center, holding a microphone, his face solemn yet radiant. "Everyone," he began, "we are not here today for grief. We are here to honor the man who taught me how to stand. The man I once rejected in shame, but who never rejected me. The man who showed me love when I deserved anger, who gave me strength when I gave him heartbreak. He is my father, my hero. And today, I walk him down an aisle, not of marriage, but of honor." 2 of my granddaughters ran to me, placing flower crowns on my head. My grandson held my hand as I was slowly wheeled forward through the garden, guests clapping, some crying, some smiling. It was as though time itself had folded back, undoing the shame of the past and replacing it with pure grace. My son walked beside me, steady and proud, just as he had once asked me to walk beside him on his second wedding day. Only this time, he was the one guiding me. The final night, that night, after the celebration, my son sat by my bedside. The house was quiet, the laughter of the day now just an echo. He held my hand the way a child holds his father's, though he was no longer a boy. "Dad," he whispered, "you can rest now. You carried me when I was broken. You fought for me when I was lost. You stood when I could not. Everything I am today is because of you." Tears filled my eyes, but I felt no pain, no regret, only peace. I squeezed his hand weakly, whispering my final words. Live with truth, son. Protect your family, forgive yourself, and remember, I never stopped being proud of you, not even for a moment. He wept openly, his tears falling onto my hand, his head bowed. I closed my eyes, my last sight being the face of the boy I raised, now a man who had risen beyond his scars. And with the weight of years lifting from me, I drifted into the great silence, knowing my journey was complete. They tell me, though I did not live to see it, that my funeral was filled with people from every corner of my life. Neighbors, co-workers, even strangers who had heard of our story came to pay their respects. My son stood tall, his voice steady as he delivered the eulogy. He did not speak of my mistakes, nor of the years of pain. He spoke of sacrifice, of forgiveness, of love that endures when all else fails. And when he finished, he placed his hand on the coffin and whispered for only me to hear, "Rest now, Dad. I'll carry your name with honor." From that day forward, he lived not as the man who once cast aside his father, but as the son who redeemed him. And in that, my story did not end with my death. It lived on, in him, in his children, in the bond that no betrayal, no shame, no passing of time could ever destroy. Because in the end, love had the final word.